Hi, it's Lisa Hubbard. You're watching Heroes Economy TV, the place where change makers and socially conscious entrepreneurs come to connect, make an impact, and get even more inspired to make a difference. Thank you for joining us. Today, I'm so pleased to share with you the business solution to poverty. In fact, that's the name of the groundbreaking book that we're going to be talking about on today's show. And my guest today is Mel Warwick. He's a true social entrepreneur and an impact investor who's committed more than 3 decades to making a difference in this space. Mel has distinguished himself in the sector as one of the world's leading authors, consultants, and public speakers on fundraising and direct marketing. Today we're going to be discussing the practical aspects to solving the problem of poverty using business. And the book that Mel has co-authored with Paul Polak has been nothing short of phenomenal. It provides practical and profitable ways that we can address serving customers that fall in the bottom of the pyramid. That's more than 2.7 billion people on Earth who can be impacted very positively through social enterprise. I met Mel at the Social Venture Network Conference in Baltimore and was so impressed with his experience and his commitment through writing this book and getting this message out. And I had to share this with our community. So Mel, I thank you very much for joining us.
Well, thank you, Lisa. It's great to be with you.
It's been a true honor to come across your work and to share this because I feel that it's one of the most important times in humanity for us to be taking a look at how do we actually address this problem and how do we make the biggest impact that we can for the people that need it most. So Mel, I'd really love for you to start by sharing with our community how you got started in partnering with Paul to write the book. Tell us a little bit about how you got involved.
Well, the story really begins more than 4 decades ago when I served in the Peace Corps as a volunteer in Ecuador. I was there for over 3 years, and Peace Corps in total nearly 4 years. And it was that experience that gave me an appreciation for just how differently life proceeds for people who are at the bottom of the pyramid, people who today would be making $2 a day or less. And that experience propelled me into a whole series of work in the decades after that, including work in local community organizing and political action, and then in the nonprofit sector for 3 decades. More recently, I've turned to social impact investing, and in the course of that work, my affiliation with Social Venture Network, which goes back to 1990, and my involvement in a number of other like-minded organizations through that time, I came to write a book called Values-Driven Business that came from Barrett Kohler Publishers in 2006. That book was the first in a series of books on socially responsible business, a series that where I served as titular editor. And it was that experience working with the publisher and Paul's experience a couple of years later working with the same publisher on his first book, Out of Poverty, that indirectly led to our getting together. The publisher had been trying for years to get Paul to write a second book. Out of Poverty was successful. It's a good book. It introduced some revolutionary concepts. It described his experience over a quarter century in fashioning solutions to poverty using market forces in sub-Saharan Africa, Southern Asia, and elsewhere around the world. But Paul kept putting off the publisher because he said he didn't have time. And this was not a lie. He didn't have the time. He was too busy helping poor people. So the publisher somehow conspired to get the two of us together so that, in his view, I could somehow persuade Paul to work with me to develop this second book that had been elusive for several years. Well, we got together on the phone. We hit it off quite well. We spoke for about an hour and a half in that first conversation. And it turns out that we have we have a fair amount in common. I mean, we're both a couple of old farts, and Paul's older than I am, but not that much. And we've both been engaged in trying to make a difference through our lives and through the work that we do for a long time. And I think we have a similar sense of humor, which also helps a great deal.
Especially when you're writing a book, absolutely.
Oh yes, and I have done it with other people before, and failing that same sense of humor, it has been sometimes a real trial.
Well, one of the things I have to say that I am so impressed by is this book is so well written. There's so many books that take a stance, whether it's an academic perspective or an intellectual or political perspective, and you have written this book in such a way that you don't want to put it down. And I shared with you, when I sent you an email that, it's 2 o'clock in the morning and I'm still reading the book because I just could not put it down. And I'm an avid reader, and I can start to see trends and what is it that actually grabs people. And not only is it incredibly practical and incredibly straightforward, it's also providing so much value. I mean, this is condensing decades of experience down to a very singular message about how we can actually create sustainable social enterprise in the areas of the world that so many people are aspiring to make an impact and make a difference in. And in my world, I see so many entrepreneurs that have the best intentions. We have so much human capital available to us, or for good, and a lot of people are trying to understand what the model is, and that is why this book is so important. And I'd love for you to share a little bit more about the solution. Tell us a little bit more about the specifics around what this business solution is.
Well, in the broadest sense, the solution that Paul and I propose in the Business Solution to Poverty is a design, an approach to design, an approach to whole systems design, if you will. We call it zero-based design. By that we mean something akin to zero-based budgeting, where instead of just tacking on 2% or 10% per year automatically in order to get next year's budget, you start and you take a look at every single line item in the budget and try to recalculate it based on what is optimal for the current state of the business and what it would be and what's most likely to advance it. So in zero-based design, we start from scratch without any preconceptions. We don't take a product that has been successfully marketed in the global north and try to make it a little cheaper with inferior materials and taking out bells and whistles, so we can sell it for 20 or 30% less than it sells for in the north. Instead, we go out and talk to people. The very first step in trying to do business with people living on $2 a day or less is to go out where they live, sit down for hours on end, and talk to them, learn about their lives, learn about the circumstances that circumscribe their lives, learn about what they eat, what their hopes, their dreams, their fears, their aspirations are. You need to understand the context of in which your customers live. Now, you don't have to do that with a U.S. or European audience, because you've lived that experience and you have a very clear idea of what life is for your customers if they're in the top 10% of the world market. But if you're talking about people living on $1 or $2 a day, you don't know what their lives are like. You can't imagine what might motivate them to buy a product or a service from a company. That's the gist of it.
And it really is, it's the fundamentals. It's understanding your customer so intimately that you know exactly what it is that they need. And the market characteristics are so vastly different, as you rightly say. And that was the first point that Paul made when I had the conversation with him, which was that you need to be prepared to go and be on the ground and have in-depth discussions with the people that you're looking to help and find out what it is that they really need. So that's what I find really, really exciting. It's a very practical approach to building something that for so many people is so largely incomprehensible. How do we make
Right.
this massive impact on an area of the world that needs significant help? I'd love for you to share your perspective on really shifting the focus from what traditionally have been the mechanisms to support the space or the subject of poverty. And I'm talking about not-for-profits, I'm talking about NGOs. I'd really love for you to share your perspective on shifting to the capitalist model, shifting to business, and how we actually address this in a for-profit way. I think that's a very, very important piece, because one of the things I notice in this space that we operate in is that we have so many different ways of approaching it, whether it be for-profit or not-for-profit. So please share a little bit about that.
Well, the one of the fundamental problems with all the traditional approaches through the UN, through foreign aid, through the World Bank, and through the NGOs and the philanthropists has been that there has been nobody who has achieved any degree of scale in their operations. There have been hundreds, probably thousands of very successful little projects, pilot projects, that have shown the feasibility of some very exciting approach to helping people who live on $2 a day or less, but they never go to scale. They may expand a little bit in one region or one country, and then whoever it is, whether it's a government or a multilateral institution or an NGO, runs out of money, and there's nothing more to be done. So we begin with the premise that the only people with the resources, both the capital and the human resources, the skill sets necessary to help people living on $2 a day or less lift themselves out of poverty, are in the private sector. That's where the money is. There may be $150 billion a year that goes into development from all the traditional sources. But we live in a world with a $75 trillion economy. $75 trillion. As it is, $1 trillion a year is invested by world-class investors in the global South.
Yes.
Every year, $1 trillion. So we're really only suggesting that a very small portion of that be directed into these very special multinational corporations that we want to promote and that Paul is working on building.
And it's about all the experiences, all the lessons learned, particularly Paul's work on the ground,
Yes.
building a nonprofit organization and really understanding what works and what doesn't work. And, my perspective has always been, I've always been fascinated with entrepreneurship. When I was young, I tell the story of how I started 6 businesses before I was 12 years old.
Oh, really?
I learned that it was actually fun to create an exchange of value. So whether I was writing stories or I was selling, candy, I was making crafts and selling those, I recognized how much fun it was to create that exchange of value. And so I've always had this fascination with business, and what I learned through my journey of understanding and coming to terms with being a change maker and wanting to make a real difference is that we have this powerful vehicle at our fingertips. And so many people are in a time where they're observing that current systems aren't working, and people are frustrated by that, and they're trying to understand, well, what do we do about this? Well, my humble philosophy is that we just need to focus on the solutions. And perhaps we should give this idea of capitalism a chance and direct it in such a way that it becomes the force for good. And, prove the models that have worked over time that, we can create enterprise and we can create micro enterprise in all these different areas and really help these people, help their esteem, their local communities, their local economy in such a way where we make an impact and it's not from an ivory tower. So I'm so excited about it. And again, I just can't stress enough how important and valuable this work is to the world, Mel. And I want us to share this message that there are practical solutions available.
Right.
And it really does start with being, committed to understanding the market that you're looking to serve. And of course, with your wealth of experience, I do hope that, in time there'll be more opportunities to either collaborate directly with you or your team to really support the entrepreneurs that are going to make a commitment to this space. And so I'd like to leave some parting comments with our interview today. Of course, your wealth of experience really, I'd love to share with the community with one piece of advice. Is there something that you could offer that you feel is the single most important piece of advice for the social entrepreneur that's looking to either get started in this space or scale their impact? They've already started the process. What advice do you have over and above what we've talked about today?
Well, over the last 20 years, I've actually met a lot of such people. A lot of people who are students in business schools, like the Haas School of Business at UC Berkeley, the Stanford Graduate School of Business, and others, as well as through Social Venture Network and other organizations whose conferences I attend. And I have observed that what is lacking in so many of the younger people who are coming into the social enterprise space is that they have the passion, but they have not yet gotten a grounding in the need to sit down face to face and talk to people who are going to be their customers, the people that they want to help. And so the biggest single piece of advice that I could give, at least to American young entrepreneurs, is to join the Peace Corps. Now, that comes from a very personal space. It was the Peace Corps that set me off on this current course because of the thrilling and disturbing and wrenching experience that I had working with very poor people in Ecuador. But I think that it really has it offers the kind of opportunity that will give some heft to the reality that
Yes.
people are going to go into, even if they don't ever go back to the country where they serve, and they want to develop a business somewhere else. I think it is that or something very much like it. And there are other opportunities in Canada, for example. There are overseas volunteer operations that are really quite well established and very well respected. And there are in Europe as well. That's the way, I believe, to really get a sense of of how you're going to have to conduct yourself to work successfully at the bottom of the pyramid.
That is brilliant advice, and I couldn't agree more. I mean, it really is about having a deep and intimate understanding and developing compassion for
Yes.
for the enormity of the task, and it's fantastic. And as you rightly say, there are so many opportunities out there, whether it be volunteer or through the Peace Corps. There's opportunities for people to get involved at a very practical level before making a decision to get started in a business venture, and I think that's fantastic advice. So Mel, it's been an absolute joy and an honor to have you as part of our show today. And if there's anything that our community can do for you, we will spread the word. And of course, I'd like to, further promote the book and your work. And again, I thank you. Is there any other parting comments that you'd like to leave before we sign off for today?
Well, people can find out more about the book and read many articles and blog posts that are on related subjects at our website, www.businesssolutiontopoverty.com.